Hello, everyone, and welcome to Molehill Mountain, episode 434. Andrew here. So, I'm not the happiest individual on Earth, far from it. There are many things that vex me. However, though spending time on the internet this afternoon, I found something that was so uplifting. I had to sit quietly with myself for a while, then take a walk to process that perhaps there is still some good in the world. So I was watching the Corridor Cruise effects artist react video today, and they commented that the new Devil May Cry show. Well, it's not new. I think it's on its second season on Netflix. I think the Devil May Cry cartoon. Some of its gun. There's a scene in the show that lifts its gun choreography from a video that Corridor Crew itself had done several years prior. Not inspired by, directly lifted from. Uses the choreography from a video they called Tactical Reloads, which I'd never seen. But I was like, yeah, of course they did. And they seemed flattered by it, and they seemed to, it's like, oh, they took our choreography because it was so cool and then used it in their show. That's neat. And then they said something that floored me. Adi Shankar, the producer of the show, asked them permission if he could use their reload choreography from their video in his show. And I was like, what? Baseline expectations of decency were met? Wow. Wow. I don't even know how to react to that. I had to take a walk. I was moved nearly to tears. Now, maybe less impressive, Adi Shankar and the Corridor Crew are apparently longtime acquaintances, perhaps even friends. They knew each other already, but still, it warms my cold, black little heart that someone, even though it was someone they knew professionally or even personally, actually took the time to say, hey, I like your stuff. You mind if I use it in my stuff? I don't even know that he legally had to do that, but in a world where people just take other people's stuff to use in their own stuff, particularly to make stuff to sell, that was nice. I was glad to hear that. That almost cracked through my shell of morose and made me smile. Not quite, but it was on the way there. A little chip in the armor, perhaps. I forget where I saw it, but someone had mentioned Pokemon Winds and Waves. And I was like, Pokemon Winds and Waves? I'm aware of Pokemon Pokopia. Everyone's talking about that. Looks like garbage to me, but apparently everyone really, really likes it. Of course, I'm not a Minecraft fan. Even Dragon Quest builders. I love Dragon Quest, but Minecraft's just not for me. But I had not heard of Pokemon Winds and Waves. I'd not seen a trailer. I don't think I missed a Nintendo Direct. But I went on the Pokemon Company's website, and by golly gumfrey, a few weeks ago, they premiered a trailer for Pokemon Winds and Waves, the new Pokemon games. And like the last couple, this is a, what's the newest one? Z to A or something like that? It's a 3D world wander around kind of a thing. And I watched the trailer, and I was stunned. To be honest, not too damn with faint praise, but the game, from a technical presentation standpoint, looks competent, which is not something I expected from Game Freak, considering their last several 3D Pokemon games, which are technically rough. It's perhaps the most polite way I could put it. But yeah, Pokemon wins and what I still hate that they do that thing. We're gonna make two ever so slightly different versions of the same game, so yeah, gotta buy them, catch them all. I hate that still, but at least these games look nice. They look nice. They look like perfectly competent games that you would expect to see on modern, well, Nintendo's newest console. So that's nice. Good job, Game Freak. Took you a few games, but you can do it. Good job. Um, speaking of Pokemon Pokopia, a game that looked crap to me, but everyone seems to be really into. Well, not everyone, but many people really enjoy. Reading some reviews and impressions and analyses, uh, including people who didn't expect to like it. So it's kind of a you play Ditto, and it's kind of Pokemon cross Minecraft. And if you like Pokemon and you like Minecraft, you'll probably like this. Hey, Chicago. Um, but there was another game that I saw, and I went, no, that looks like garbage. I don't have any interest in playing that. And it's a little game called Crimson Desert, which, in all the footage I've seen, is neither crimson nor takes place in a desert. I would not be surprised. I'm sure there's a desert biome around somewhere, but it's everywhere I've seen is pretty mountainous and full of trees. Things do bleed when you smack them with a blunt or sharp object, so maybe that's the crimson. I suppose it's just another way of saying blood on the sand, Crimson Desert. Um, it looks like a pretty generic open world game that's full of jank. Nevertheless, I did end up reading several different reviews of the game, and I was quite amused to find that the reaction, at least among the reactions I read, were very similar. All of the reactions, and I read several, broadly said this: the game is a technical mess. Its controls are shite. It's missing features that you would expect it to have, like fast travel points. Although I've seen several of them say this has been, as of published, this was added in a patch last night or something. So kind of sounds like they released the game before it was finished. Who's ever heard of something like that? So it's a technical mess. Its controls are garbage. It's missing a bunch of, like, literally, apparently picking shit up off the floor is cumbersome. There's not enough space in your inventory based on the amount of crap you have to pick up off the floor. It's missing, fast travel features that you would expect in a large open world game. It's needlessly obtuse in its myriad game mechanics and systems. Not in a you are now unleashed on an open world, and it's up to you to make discoveries and find out how things work, and more along the lines of, we couldn't bother actually explaining this properly, but we are sure several of you will write a wiki. Go look at that. I mean, we wanted this to be a community effort. But, says all of the reviews and reactions that I've read, but despite all that, I can't stop playing it. It's so captivating, so compelling. I lay awake at night thinking about it, because the open world is so big and vast and chock-a-block with an immense variety of interesting, fun things to do. Huh. How's about that? Well, maybe over the next couple of months when they iron out things like explaining the game mechanics and making it less cumbersome to pick things up off the floor. Maybe it'll be a game worth checking out for me. For someone like me, it kind of sounds like a game that I would admire many aspects of it, but would probably bounce off of Toot Sweet. Like, for example, I liked Dark Souls, but I never finished it. And it wasn't a skill issue, I'll have you know. I just eventually, as much as I liked so much about Dark Souls, eventually the game's bullshit caught up with me. The game is, and I think you would be hard-pressed to find a Dark Souls fan who wouldn't readily admit, yeah, the game's got some jank. The game's got some bullshit. I remember what it was for me, too. I was on a Souls run, just kind of running back and going out from the bonfire, killing a bunch of people, and coming back to bank up my souls. Because there was a cool new weapon at the blacksmith's or something, but I couldn't equip it because I didn't have a high enough stat, like dexterity or something like that. So I'm like, okay, I'll spend some time grinding out some souls, and I'll pop them into dex or whatever the skill was so that I could use it. So I had been, grinding souls for half an hour, and I took a bad hit and I died, as happened. So I was carefully going back to where I dropped my souls. And I was passing through a room in a castle, and I took a bad hit from an enemy, so playing smartly, I backed the hell off, because you can die very quickly. I backed off to the far end of the room, and exited the room, and went down the hallway. I looked to one end of the hallway. All clear. I looked to the other end of the hallway. All clear. I looked at the portal I exited the room from to make sure the little asshole wasn't following me out into the hallway. All clear. And as I started chugging my Estus flask, the little shit shivved me right through the goddamn wall. And I died. And I lost all of my souls. And I said, nope, I'm done. All done. I like a lot about Dark Souls, I truly, truly do, but I am heretofore unwilling to put up with this game's bullshit. I am done. Chicago says, I read that Crimson Desert has a lot of AI-generated assets. Well, that's a shame to hear. Maybe desert means devoid of human-created assets. Maybe. But I found that kind of an interesting perspective on a game. It's like, yeah, I mean, it's just such an amazing world to inhabit and explore. And there's so much to do, and it's so varied. And you can pick up kitties. And I'm like, yeah, that's true. But for me, if the basic mechanics of the game aren't there, for me, like, systems aren't properly explained. It's missing travel points. Picking up things off the floor is a mechanical pain in the ass somehow. Uh, that would that for me, I think that would be a bit much. I think that would get in the way of my own enjoyment. But you know, it was interesting to because I had absorbed that the impressions were positive, and I was looking at and I was thinking of the marketing I'd seen. I'm like, why is this so popular? It looks just kind of crap and janky and just another one of those open world checklist kind of a things. Not that those are always bad things. I did like Ghost of Tsushima. I did like Horizon. Those are big open world checklist games. But that's what got me into reading a bunch of reviews. I'm like, well, it looks like there's something there. You know, a diamond in a lot of rough, very rough. Um, Chicago says, okay, that's definitely crap. Getting stabbed through a door. No, not through a door. Through a brick. Through a. It was in a castle kind of an area, so big brick block walls. like there was a room. Enemy was on one side of the room. I walked to the far end of the room, out the door, and down the hallway, and he just went and just stabbed me right through the damn wall. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure this is not like a special move that this enemy has. Like there's what was I playing that Clair Obscure. There are some enemies in Clair Obscure that will just cheat the turn order, and it's just a mechanic that they have, and I hate that. I don't mind if they have like extra. I just wish if they're gonna steal turns or add turns or something, just put your name in the queue like everyone else. Because I'm like, I look at the turn order and I go, okay, you attack, and then Lune is up, so I'm gonna do this with Lune, and then follow up with Mael, and blah 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 blah. And I'm like, okay, it's my turn, and then I get smacked in the face with something. I'm like, what the? It's not your turn. What the hell, man? And at first, it's like really confusing. It's like, did I misread something? And after a while, I'm like, oh, you're just an asshole. You're cheating. Don't like that. So no, I don't think that was the case. I think the enemy just stabbed me through a wall because the game's a little janky. It's all. So last weekend, I saw a video on my YouTube recommends feed from a channel called Outside Xbox. Interesting name. And this video was called 7 Game Company Decisions That Backfired Horribly. And the screenshot was that Blizzard guy where they were announcing Diablo Immortal, the mobile Diablo game. And the audience wasn't having it. And he said, do you guys not have phones? That was released last weekend. Outside Xbox is probably kicking themselves after the events of this week. Namely, NVIDIA shooting themselves in the foot repeatedly, every day, all week. I imagine the folks at Outside Xbox are saying, oh man, we should have waited like 2 more days. We would have had a top 8. Chicago says they're villains. They don't follow the rules, cheating, going when it's not their turn. I'm not surprised. Yeah. I don't like it. So, this week, NVIDIA at GTC announced, although it wasn't part of their main, from what I understand, I didn't watch it, wasn't part of their main, like, 3-hour damn presentation where they didn't really talk about video games. But they did have announcements to talk about DLSS 5. And where I first saw stuff about DLSS 5 was from Digital Foundry. and I didn't write down the title of the video, but it was like, new DLSS 5 uses Gen AI to improve lighting or something. And I'm like, okay. Chaos, hello. So I watched the video. And how it was presented, at least the way Digital Foundry was describing it, I would assume based on press releases and things that they had been told by NVIDIA, was thusly. DLSS, two S's, DLSS 5 is using generative AI to improve lighting, to make scenes look more realistic, which, sure, is what happens when you improve the lighting. So in my mind, I was thinking of something like, adding ray tracing to a scene. You have baked in shadows, and then you turn on the ray tracing, and nothing changes. You don't get better models or better textures, and the lighting doesn't change. It just becomes better. Like, the lighting, it doesn't change as in, like, the light sources don't change. A tree casts a shadow here because the light source is on the other side of the tree. But with, normal baked-in lighting, you get kind of a blobby shadow for the tree. You turn on our ray tracing, and you get a much more sharp, defined shadow for the tree that looks a lot nicer. You get all kinds of cool stuff like bounce lighting and ambient occlusion, where the edges of stuff that are slightly shading stuff where light doesn't get a little bit darker. Elements, objects in an environment will have a slight hue based on the color of the objects around them. So if you have a pot sitting on a shelf next to a blue wall, with the proper lighting, the pot will take on somewhat of a blue hue because of the light bouncing off the blue wall right next to it, right? So it makes the scene look richer, more detailed, more lived in, more grounded, more realistic. It improves the lighting. So I figured it was something along those lines. I didn't know exactly how it was working. This was in like the first couple of minutes of the video before we'd seen any demonstrations. But I was thinking, how might they be using this? Are they like using generative AI's predictive output? As I'm sure all of you are aware, generative AI's output is predictive. It's not determinative. It doesn't look up an answer. It doesn't like calculate an answer. It doesn't figure out it doesn't determine what the answer is. It predicts what the answer looks like, which is why it's wrong sometimes. So I was thinking, how could you use that? Well, maybe they're doing a few of the, ray trace calculations to get like a baseline for some of the casts, and then they're using generative AI to just, based on what the results of the casts that they calculated longhand, so to speak, generative AI is taking all that and the scene and predicting what the calculations for the rest of the casts should be. And if that is cheaper in the sense of it takes less time to do, that might be a way to get better lighting or even more casts than you would be able to otherwise. You would likely have a few casts calculate incorrectly, but they'd probably be close enough that if you have like 5% of your casts that are off by some margin, 5%, 10%, but they're fairly randomly put out, your eye probably wouldn't notice it frame to frame. So, okay, interesting. Let's see what we got here. So that's how Digital Foundry described it. Using generative AI to improve the lighting in a scene to make the scene more realistic. Okay, cool. Let's see it. And the first thing they showed off was probably the most famous, infamous, we might say, image And that's the DLS on slash DLS off image of Grace from the very early moments of Resident Evil Requiem. They show her standing there on the street. You know, it's a this is a scene early in the game. Grace is a young person who, you know, in her 20s somewhere. Her mom was murdered in front of her. She's now an FBI analyst, and she's been asked to go to the site of her mother's murder some years back, where another murder has taken place, to analyze the crime scene. So, of course, you know, she's walking down the street to the place. This is where her mom died years ago. She's not a field agent, so where she's going to be roiling with self-doubt and nerves and emotions and all that kind of stuff. She is, and, you know, because this is, I was going to say cinema, but it's not cinema, because this is a story, a curated experience meant to tell a story and communicate emotions. Of course it's raining, like it does at every funeral in a movie, right? If it's sad, it's overcast and raining. So it's raining on the street. Visibility is a little low if you try to look down the street because of the, you know, the water vapor in the air. The sidewalk is wet, right? So that's the scene. Now with DLSS off, it was pretty clear to me that they were using like the lowest PC settings. Like, these were not PC settings equal high. This was PC settings equal the lowest thing, which I don't begrudge them. That's okay. That's a marketing thing. We want it to, it's like, you know, if you, and it might be a smart thing to do. It's like, if you can't run this thing but on the lowest settings, look what DLSS 5 can do for you. Of course, if you can't run the goddamn game on anything but the lowest settings, you're definitely not running DLSS 5, but we'll get there. So they showed Grace standing there on the rainy street corner with the camera in her face, and they did the swipe to DLSS 5, and I went, oh. Oh. That's not improved lighting. That's a different character. That's an AI filter. I'm not special. I'm not more observant or technically savvy or smarter than anyone else. Except maybe the CEO of NVIDIA. I certainly was not alone in that impression, because everyone had the same reaction. Well, that looks like an AI filter. And we said it because even those of us who are not particularly technically savvy can intuit simple truisms like changing the lighting does not give you lipstick, or eyeshadow, or make your eyes slightly bigger, or your lips thinner and fuller. And it certainly doesn't change your blonde hair to brunette with blonde highlights. Also, the lighting changed. It didn't improve. It changed. The light sources are different. If you look into the background, remember how I said it was a rainy, you know, it's an atmospheric rainy day with lower visibility because of the, you know, the wetness and the, you know, the slight fog. The AI just kind of ate all that. You can see very clearly all the way down the street because it just sucked up all the atmosphere. Now it's just kind of a weird looking day with kind of a sickly yellowish sky. That looks like an AI filter. And I was genuinely shocked by the way that Digital Foundry was talking about this tech, and I remained shocked throughout the rest of the demonstrations that they showed which only further convinced me that this is an AI filter. This is not changing this is not improving the lighting. This is a filter. Wow, DF, I'm disappointed in you. And I thought, is this another case of DF doing a sponsored video and not disclosing it? Because that's happened before. Although they've been pretty good about it of late. In fact, I think like the day before this DLSS 5 reaction, they had a sponsored video from NVIDIA on Resident Evil, which I didn't watch because sponsored video. Can't trust what it says. So I, out of morbid curiosity, scrolled down and looked at the comments, and I have to admit, I was pretty tickled to see that every single comment that I read, and I did not read all of them, there were thousands, but literally every single comment that I read in my few pages of scrolling were calling out DF. We're saying, like, this is clearly an AI filter. Art thou blind? So I switched over to NVIDIA's YouTube channel, which was just showing off the little swipes of no DLSS 5? Yes, DLSS 5. Or as some people on social media, yes, DLSS 5. Everyone's calling it a yassification filter, which I think is very, very funny. So the NVIDIA video, I looked at the comments and same exact thing. I couldn't even, now I did not audit every single comment, but I couldn't even find any AI stands in the comments when I looked on Monday, Tuesday, whenever this was. So I mean that was nice. You know, I felt pretty good about humanity being able to recognize a reality for what it is for once and call it that. That's nice. That's encouraging. So the next day, Digital Foundry walked it back with probably the most hilarious thumbnail, because all of them look really embarrassed and miserable. And one of the gentlemen, they're like, "Hi, I'm here. Okay, we got it wrong, and you know, I'm Dave or whatever, and la da 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 da. And with me is Larry, and Larry's like, "Hey, I'm happy to be here." He did not look happy to be there. No. The third guy looked... I can't read people, like body language, but I can only guess he's like, boy, I don't know what his true feelings are. I'm not calling, you know, what he expressed false. I'm just thinking, man, I bet he's glad he wasn't in that initial video. It's like, shit, I wasn't on the video yesterday, so my hands are clean. That's kind of a no-lose situation, or I'm sorry, no-win situation for DF, because I mean, okay, they're calling it what it is now. I mean, they're softballing it, but they are calling it what they're like, okay, we jumped the gun, we got lost in our own excitement, we rushed and didn't really have a chance to look at it and really analyze it, which of course comes out as false because you guys are professionals and we aren't, and we immediately clocked it as an AI filter. What's your excuse? But beyond that, now it comes across as if they get yelled at, they'll change their opinion. So can we trust their opinions? Are their opinions whatever NVIDIA or whomever tells them they are? And will they just change it in accordance with the direction the wind is blowing? I don't know. But that's going to be something that DF has to deal with, and they've had some problems in the last year and a half or so with not properly identifying sponsored content, and now this. So they've lost, I think, a lot of credibility and are going to have to put in a lot of work to earn that back. And to be clear, I don't begrudge them doing sponsored videos, so long as they make sure to note that they make it very clear and label them very clearly that they are sponsored videos. I imagine the DF operation is very expensive. I'm sure they do get a lot of their tech from the companies they cover, but I imagine a lot of it they don't. I imagine they have to buy a lot of that shit themselves, and that is very pricey, particularly right now. So I certainly do not begrudge them doing sponsored work. Just got to make sure that you clearly label it as such. Well, shortly after that, NVIDIA did an interview with, who was it? I think it was Tom's Hardware. Yeah. And said the thing that will probably go down, will probably be on Outside Xbox next list of really dumb things for CEOs to say. I don't think the, don't you guys have phones? He wasn't a CEO, he was like a studio head or something like that. But Tom's Hardware, when I first read this quote, I don't think Jensen is Jensen Huang? Jensen Huang, who I'm probably mispronouncing that. I do apologize. I haven't heard it spoken out loud, so I'm not entirely sure of the pronunciation. But the CEO of NVIDIA, even though I don't feel he's earned it, I was still inclined to give him, to extend him a bit of courtesy, a bit of the benefit of the doubt, because the way the article was written, Tom's Hardware's write-up said, we asked him about this, and this is how he responded. And I thought, well, I don't know what happened in editing, right? His response is so shit, it almost feels like it was a response to a different question. That can happen in articles. And I didn't have the original text of the text of the actual question that was asked, so I was willing, though I don't think he earned it, to extend Mr. Huang some grace. Tom or whoever the editor is, has since I never put any faith, says Chaos, in anything said by Digital Foundry. Yeah. And I think they're going to have to work. Chaos may be a lost cause, but some people who enjoyed their content and turned to them for evaluations of how games run on different setups and different consoles are probably, they're going to have to do some work to rebuild that trust. But anyway, Tom's Hardware updated the article to give the actual the actual text of the question asked. So here's what the question is. Since DLSS 5 was revealed yesterday, there's been a pretty vocal response from some of the gaming community that the technology appears to make games appear worse, homogeneous, or show only NVIDIA's view of how games should look. How do you feel about that criticism? Well, responded Huang, first of all, they're completely wrong. Let me read that quote again so you get so it's very clear what he's saying we're wrong about. Vocal response from some of the gaming community that the technology appears to make games appear worse, homogeneous, or show NVIDIA's view of how games should look. They're completely wrong. It doesn't look worse or homogeneous. And it's not just NVIDIA's view about how games should look. They're completely wrong. Even though it is undeniable that the 6 or 7 different games that were shown off with DLSS 5 are quite homogeneous in their look. That's inarguable. Now, whether it makes it worse or not, I think comes down to whether you give a shit about art direction. For example, Grace, in that screenshot. Is her skin texture more realistic in the DLSS 5 screenshot? Yeah. Is the leather of her coat or jacket, is that a more realistic leathery looking jacket in the DLSS 5 screenshot? Yeah. And if that's all you care about, then sure. But if you care about art direction and character and emotion and environmental storytelling, then it's inarguably worse. And there are also some other small problems, which we'll get into in a bit once we talk about exactly what's going on under the hood. The reason, Huang says after calling everyone wrong in their opinions, the reason for that is because, as I've explained very carefully, DLSS 5 fuses controllability of the geometry and textures and everything about the game with generative AI. Developers can still fine-tune the generative AI to make it match their style, and this is not an exact quote, but to make it match their style, adding that DLSS 5 adds generative capability to the existing geometry of the game, but that it doesn't change the artistic control. Now, this is a direct quote. It's not post-processing. It's not post-processing, he repeated, at the frame level. It's generative control at the geometry level. I think most of us, using our eyeballs to look at the examples that NVIDIA decided themselves to share with us, would understandably think that Mr. Huang either doesn't know what he's talking about or is outright lying. Because that certainly looks like a filter, which would be post-processing. It looks like the game engine is generating the frame, and then the AI is painting over it. We'll get to that in a moment. Now, many different outlets have interviewed or collected comments from many game developers. All of them are negative. Some are more polite than the other, but there are dozens and dozens and dozens of not just indie developers, but major artists and creative leads from major studios, and they're all, what is this shit? But to be fair, as NVIDIA themselves provided, they provided quotes from major game development studios that are very complimentary towards DLSS 5, and I think it only fair that I read those. So, from Bethesda, NVIDIA and Bethesda have a long history of pushing gaming graphics and innovation forward, and DLSS 5 represents the next major step in that journey. With DLSS 5, the artistic style and detail shine through without being held back by the traditional limits of real-time rendering. We're excited to work with this new technology and look to bring DLSS 5 to Starfield and future Bethesda titles. Someone from Capcom said, at Capcom, we strive to create experiences that feel cinematic, compelling, and deeply believable, where every shadow, texture, and ray of light is crafted with intention to enhance atmosphere and emotional impact. DLSS 5 represents another important step in pushing visual fidelity forward, helping players become even more immersed in the world of Resident Evil. And from Vantage Studios, I have no idea who that is. Immersion is about making the world feel real. DLSS 5 is a real step towards that goal. The way it renders lighting, materials, and characters changes what we can promise to players. On Assassin's Creed Shadows, okay, I'm assuming Vantage Studios is a subsidiary of Ubisoft and worked on Assassin's Creed. On Assassin's Creed Shadows, it's letting us build the kind of worlds we've always wanted to. So, not every game developer is down or poo-pooing DLSS 5. There's 3 examples right there, helpfully provided by NVIDIA itself. Now, let me get a shovel and dig up the lead that I buried. Who were those quotes from? Well, let's see. The first quote was from Todd Howard, studio head and executive producer at Bethesda Game Studios. Who was the Capcom quote from? Why, Jun Takeuchi, executive producer and executive corporate officer at Capcom. What about the Vantage person? Well, that was Charlie, a French name that I'm not going to be able to pronounce correctly. He's the co-CEO of Vantage Studios. Yeah. So, unsurprisingly, the suits love it. The executive class loves it. The CEOs, investors, they love it. Tech bros who are trying to sell you shit, they love it. The actual artists, the people who actually do the work, the creatives, not so much. Oh, we've also seen quotes from some of these studios, the studios that they're Capcom, who, you know, it showed off Resident Evil, Bethesda, where, you know, it showed off Starfield is theirs, I think. Ubisoft, I think, had something there. Some of the studios who had their own game, because a lot of people were thinking, well, I mean, you know, Capcom and Ubisoft and Bethesda and stuff like that, their games are being shown. EA, whoever the hell does Hogwarts Legacy, Warner Brothers, I guess, they must have been asked, right? So they must have known and looked at it and said, yes, this is how we want to be represented. It's cool. So it must be, right? Sure. Well, no, because it's clearly the studio's suits and execs who said yes, not the people who worked on the project, because there's been a bunch of quotes from employees of Capcom and Bethesda and Ubisoft and a few others who've said, we didn't know about it until the day. Okay, so upper management gave it the okay, but we didn't know about it, and we don't like it. So, do you remember, but a few minutes ago, when Jensen Huang said it's not post-processing, it's not post-processing at the frame level, it's generative control at the geometry level. Well, some dude named, was it Owen? Daniel Owens, who is a PC gaming hardware enthusiast and YouTuber, interviewed one Jacob Freeman, who, so far as I can tell, is a marketing dude at NVIDIA, and asked him a bunch of specific questions. And Daniel Owens asked him, is DLSS 5 effectively taking a single 2D frame as an input with motion vectors so it knows where to go from there to create the output frame? And Jacob Freeman responded, yes, DLSS 5 takes a 2D frame plus motion vectors as an input. It's trained end-to-end to understand complex scenes semantics such as characters, hair, fabric, and translucent skin, along with environmental lighting conditions like front-lit, backlit, or overcast, all by analyzing a single frame. So yes, despite what Jensen Huang, the CEO of NVIDIA, emphatically said and doubled down on the day before, this is indeed not just a post-processing effect, because the game is rendering the image, then sending the rendered image to AI, and AI is then, in social media parlance, yassifying it. So not only is that a post-processing effect, that's an AI filter. So I hope you're all flexible enough to pat yourselves on the back, because we all got it right. It looked like an AI filter, and indeed, it definitely is an AI filter. Also, Digital Foundry in their initial video mentioned, by the way, that all these demos were running on two 5090 graphics cards. Two of them. One running the game, and the second one running DLSS 5. DF reports that NVIDIA told them that they have it running on one graphics card back home. I'm not inclined to extend them the benefit of the doubt on that one. If I were being charitable, I might suggest that they did dual 5090s, because that's really the only way you can toggle between no DLSS 5 and yes DLSS 5. If it was running on one graphics card, they'd have to, either go into settings or even close and reopen the game. In order to do that, they wouldn't be able to just toggle between the two, but with a dual graphics card setup, they could easily toggle between the two. But I'm not that charitable, and I have heard absolutely no one suggest that's the case. What it sounds like is they need two 5090s to run it. 5090 is about the top of the line graphics card that you could possibly get right now, mass market. And I looked at the price a few days ago. It's about $4,000. So even if they do get it running on one 5090 by the end of the year, and the price drops some by the end of the year, you're still looking at a graphics card that's probably still over $3,000, if you can even get it. So even if this technology does work the way they say, and it does come out, how many people are actually going to be able to use it for the next couple of years? Also, a question I have is, how consistent is the generative AI output? Is Grace going to be yassified in exactly the same way in every shot? Like, she looks this way in cutscene 1, and then 10 minutes later in the next cutscene she looks a bit different? I don't know. But there are also clearly some bugs to work out. Some things I noticed was because it's only getting the completed rendered frame and some motion vectors telling it which direction things are moving so that it can calculate for the next frame. It doesn't understand anything in screen space. So it doesn't have any concept of... It can see where there is light and where there is shadow, but it doesn't know where the light is. It also doesn't know what's outside the screen. So if you look at the full frame images and get the 4K versions, and if you have a nice monitor and blow them up to full screen and really take a look at them, there's this weird vignette around the edges of the screen. I would imagine because it's having more difficulty guessing what the hell is on the edge of the screen because it has no context for what's outside the frame because it only has the one rendered image. Unless it gets a game that overscans, that might help that a bit. Also, you see this with moving characters, particularly talking about the Grace shot. There is one actor, one character with an umbrella walking past in the background, and if you look behind them, there's some weird haloing that seems to be on moving objects, because as background elements are no longer occluded by stuff in the foreground, it doesn't know what that is or what it was because it had no information on it prior, so it seems to create this weird kind of halo around moving objects. You'll notice that most of the demos we saw were of characters standing still, looking, facing the camera, and not moving too much, with not much camera movement. Although most of them had a post push-in, that didn't seem to be actually part of the rendered game, an in-game camera movement. That looks like a 4K image that they're pushing in on to put some movement in there. So they're clearly making sure that characters are facing the camera and holding still, and that there's still-ish. They're not stock still. They are moving a bit. And that the camera is not doing wild things, but, I'd be interested to see quicker camera movements and, circle it around a character, things like that. I think the funniest one that I saw is someone blew up an image of, I think it was Starfield. There's a scene of two characters standing in what looks like a spaceship hangar. And it's pretty much impossible to see unless you zoom in and really look. But the male character on the screen left, he had the original frame has a lighting to his left, which means there's a shadow on the side of his nose. In the yassified version, it's clear that the AI is looking at that small shadow next to his nose and mistaking it for part of his nostril. So in the yassified frame, the character's right nostril is disproportionate to his left. It's bigger because the AI mistook the shadow for part of his nostril. Also, it seemed to change the left side of his hair from a buzz cut to a fade. Probably because I would assume that's why everyone looks like they're standing in front of a goddamn ring light, because it's probably trained on a lot of Instagram photos and podcasts where people sit in front of ring lights. Like the Leon yassified one, he gets an extra highlight in his eyeballs, like he's standing in front of a studio light. Overall, overall, is the lighting better? I don't think so. It's just like cranking the brightness and the sharpness and making everything just overly washed out and lacking in character. There's one, I think it's Starfield. There's one character wearing a brimmed hat, and in the original frame, he has a shadow across half of his face because of the brim on his hat. In the yassified version, the shadow's completely gone because it doesn't understand lighting direction at all. Everything's just brighter and sharper, and it looks like shit. It's just overcranked. It's bad. It doesn't look good. I mean, yeah, that looks like a more real skin texture, and yeah, that looks like more real leather or fabric or whatever. Oh, I think the most egregious one is one of some lady in Hogwarts Legacy. It turns her face into beef jerky. So, also, in the original shot, she's holding a wand that's glowing blue on the end, and there's a faint blue. It's not the greatest lighting effect, but there is a cast from the blue light of her wand that's reflecting off of her face. Her face has a subtle blue glow from the wand she's holding out in front of her. That's fucking gone with the yassified version that turns her face into beef jerky. So, yeah. Not the best week for NVIDIA. Is it going to matter in the long run? I don't know. I mean, NVIDIA, I think, has like over 90% market penetration with graphics cards, so who knows? Is everyone going to switch to AMD? Probably not. Is this Oh, another thing that was funny, I forgot to write this in my notes, but another thing that NVIDIA said, well, Jensen Huang, what he said is, and was also contradicted by the the marketing guy that something Owens interviewed, is that developers have control over this. They can do all kinds of stuff, and they even like tune shading and stuff. And according to the Tom whatever, no, not really. No, no, no. They can mask off certain sections to not yassify. Um, they can do color grading, but according to him, there's no real like yassify in this certain style. So that appeared to be either Jensen doesn't know what the hell he's talking about, or he's deliberately lying. Then again, he's not trying to sell this shit to us. He's trying to sell this shit to investors, and they love it. So, but at least we don't have to worry about it infesting our games for a while, because I don't think many of us can afford 4090s, and probably won't for a while. So, lastly, I would like to talk very briefly about Suikoden 2. I'm playing it and I'm quite enjoying it. I think it's a significant step up over the original, which is something I was hoping to see. So I'm very glad to see that. But I did just want to tell two very short stories. One is I was playing it today, and I was having trouble getting a scene to spawn, because there's a hint where these ruffians are are attacking young ladies, and that's supposed to hint you to stock your party with ladies and go wander around town and get assaulted, and then an event happens. And it didn't happen for me. So I looked at a guide, because I'm like, maybe I'm just wrong, and no, I was right. I talked to the right person, and I understood the hint, and I had the right idea, but I think Hannah is a guy. And I'm like, oh, okay, sorry, Hannah, my bad. So I took Hannah out of the party and replaced him with Kinnison or someone. And I went back, and the problem is this event happens in a town over here on the map, and I can only change characters at the castle way over here. So I had to go all the way back, drop Hannah off, grab Kinnison, walk back, still no people. And I'm like, is Kinnison a dude? I ran back and I dropped off Kinnison and I picked up Anita. And I'm like, I mean, she's very feminine presenting to me. Not to stereotype, but, she's wearing lipstick, she's got earrings. This is a late 90s game, so she's got a feminine name. So I'm thinking lady. Ran all the way back, still no. And after about 20 minutes of running back and forth, trying to, reorganizing my party, I finally found on a message board that it's not just ladies. You can't have any young ladies. I had Tuda in my party, and she's apparently just too young. So, yeah, Zanza, not a lady either, apparently. Oops. Sorry. Misgendering half of my army. I'm so sorry. You're all so pretty. But eventually I got it to work. The other thing I wanted to regale you with, or attempt to regale you with, is eventually they're like, run, children, run to the hills and live your lives, and you're like, no, we want to stay and fight. And they're like, well, I mean, okay, we'll give you a unit of army grunts, and you can try not to die. And so you're given the opportunity, after you show some success, you're given the opportunity. You're given a unit, and you're given the opportunity to, like you can with the character's name, you're given the opportunity to name your unit. And so, of course, I looked online, like I did with the character's name, to see if there was a canon name, as there is with the character's name. But as far as their military unit goes, so far as I could tell, there was no canon name, which meant that I got to name him. So, of course, Ryo is in charge of the absolute unit. And I've been giggling about that for like 3 solid days now. Because I'm 12 years old. That's right. You are now in the presence of the absolute unit. Ah, it's fun being immature. All right. That's it from me for tonight. Hope you enjoyed listening to me ramble. And I hope to see you tomorrow for what will probably be the finale of Cold Steel 2. I have enough money now to buy the rest of the Phantasmal Mirrors, so we can play with all those characters as we work our way up the old schoolhouse levels and kick the crap out of whoever's sitting at the top. So join me tomorrow for the Sunday stream. Hope to see you there, and until then, have a good night. Take care. Bye-bye.